And on behalf of IUDI National Body, I warmly welcome you for this launch event. Welcome everyone. Yeah, can we acknowledge that? So to give us a picture of Mumbai Center, I'm going to invite Jasmine Saluja to share with everybody what we've been doing so far. And to introduce Jasmine, I would say that she's been somebody who has been associated with the formulation of Mumbai Center since the beginning. One of the core group members for the working team here in Mumbai. And she's also one of the founder members of a group called Plurals, which is a group of multidisciplinary professionals interested in generating critical and lateral collaborative approach towards urban realm. Most of you would be aware the group Plurals have recently received won the competition for the International Idea Competition of Dharavi. And it's, Jasmine has been enthusiastically coordinating Mumbai Center activities so far. She's a visiting faculty at Kamla Raheja School of Architecture, along with her practice in architecture and urban design.
We feel Mumbai is definitely energetic. We feel it's a mosaic of entrepreneurial achievements and economic success stories. It's a mega city, a city of vibrant lifestyles, and Mumbai also has multiple cities of acknowledged and unacknowledged spaces and cultures. And it is also being subjected to the fast-changing urban scenario, which is transforming it at a very accelerating pace. It was this transformation which was happening in Mumbai, which brought a couple of us together, and we said that there is something missing today. And we feel that the missing element, even beyond urban policy procurements, is cities being designed in accordance with the people who stay here. So it was these challenges which kind of brought us together, and we started debating it over a period of almost 2 years. And we also started parallelly working on an urban design agenda for Mumbai. So what emerged within these deliberations during these workshops were connecting people, urban thinkers, representatives from MMRDA, CITCO, some of them are here together with us to support, NGOs and private sectors. For example, if urban design tools are plugged into area level planning system, it creates a direct impact to the people and to the urban scenario in Bombay. Even like connecting open spaces, addressing open spaces with pedestrian connectivity to transport, this kind of integration is what we feel that can be made more experiential through urban design. So to address these diverse challenges, development challenges, IUDI Mumbai Center set a 3-point agenda for itself. So its primary goal was to advocate urban design by creating awareness and establish importance among various stakeholders, be it the municipal leaders, the private developers, citizens, or people who are into campaigning, activists, through demonstration projects, conferences, publication, and academic studios. Our second agenda is to support the professional fraternity of urban designers and encourage collaborative lectures, exhibition of works, studio exchange, and create awareness by creating job opportunities for them. One of the key issues which came up during our workshops, which we want to address through this goal, was to promote representation of urban design professionals for public and private employment, posts related in urban planning and development. So we would kind to initiate these special posts for urban designers. Our third goal was to act as a one-point resource information for the city. The center is also keen to engage as an expert or advisor for visionary strategies and consulting projects at an urban scale. So hence the members of IUDI would not only be urban designers, as Jan also said, but would also be from allied disciplines where we have affiliated memberships, and they had come from various backgrounds, from landscape architecture to transport planning to social sciences.
Currently, K.T. Ravindran is the Dean Emeritus of RICS School of Built Environment at Amity University. He is the Chairman of Architectural Heritage Committee of INTAC trustee of Indian Heritage Cities Network Foundation and was the member of Advisory Board for the United Nations Capital Master Plan, New York. He was appointed as a part of experts committee under the Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, regarding the new capital for the successor state of Andhra Pradesh. He spent almost over 3 decades at the School of Planning, Delhi, heading the department. He's an inspiration for many of us to take up standing for the cause of urban design, all the time advocating, promoting urban design education, and urban design thinking, encouraging students to think on those grounds. It has been a privilege again to be associated with him, being taught by him, and having him on the common platform here together today. Katie, thank you very much for being here. He's also the chairman of Urban Arts Commission in Delhi, and he's worked, researched in several journals and published in several books internationally. I'm inviting Katie now for his thoughts on the smart city agenda, which will be again followed by the panel discussion today. Katie.
It's really a great pleasure to see that Mumbai has come alive to urban design. It's been alive to urban design for a long time, but this is the first time there's been an organized effort to bring people together. And from now on, I think the profession will change gear in this city, and we will see new things happening in both Mumbai and in Navi Mumbai. Because Navi Mumbai has Ramesh Dengle as a driving force, and he has managed also to gather quite a few urban designers in the fold of CIDCO. And I'm sure what is now kind of just buildings and big roads will someday become a live, vibrant city because the presence of urban design there. And the makings of it is already there. And today, in this discussion we are going to have on smart cities, I have been given the task to set the basic agenda as a framework for the discussion. That is not to preempt the ideas which anyone else might have, but it's only to put on the table few things which I think are critical for the involvement of urban design in the new idea formations in urbanization in India. The smart city concept began as an election slogan, and it's now in the second phase of that slogan, where it is being thrown open for public discourse. And this meeting, including this meeting, there are a number of meetings happening in which this public discourse on what is a smart city, how to go about it, is being opened up. Now, this is an essential stage which is necessary between implementation and an idea, where the nuances of the idea of smart cities are opened up contextually in different cities. So what I have tried to do is to bring in some of what I think are the fundamental principles through which what we call smartness can be defined. Now, due apologies to Suketu Mehta, I have used the title The Optimum City for Bombay, because I think when you translate the idea of maximum city to urban development, what you will have is the kind of chaos that we have in central parts of our cities. So we need to look at the optimization of relationship between city formation and city form and the ideas of urban design. Because urban design really attempts to bring the city to the people and make the people custodians of the city. This is a very basic premise on which urban design is pitched. And when the institute was also formed, it was a fundamental idea was that the institute will work together with the local bodies in public interest. So the public interest and ethical practices that should actually lead public interest must lead the practice of urban design. That was the idea with which that seed was planted in the formation of the Institute of Urban Design. So with that I will now the first thing is that what you call a smart city is something that optimizes city resources and services, match between the resources which are around the milllands and the building form, urban form that's come up in those sites. We have very narrow, poorly designed intersections servicing thousands of cars which are going into the basement parkings of these tall buildings. And we also have services which are already strained, and an explosion that's happening in the center of cities that is excluding the common man from accessing central lands and central spaces in the cities, because they are also premium spaces in terms of the cost of land. So first thing is to optimize this relationship, and optimize the relationship through the instrument of urban design. Then urban design correlates the carrying capacity of services in urban form and optimizes densities in building bulk. I've put in red the operative words, because if these things are just spoken, it'll be just a jumble of ideas and nothing will remain in the audience's head. So, having been a professor for 33 years, I'm compulsive. I'm a compulsive when it comes to a lecture, always using a format which I think communicates best to the audience, which is a written down format. Now, here the smart systems also have their limit, and it often precludes the open-ended growth. That is, today's cities, for instance, are open-ended cities. We don't draw any limits for the growth. It can grow vertically as much as you want, and before that it will spread as much as you want, or as much as the developers want, because they want to bring in more and more land into the market. So we have a completely open-minded approach to cities, open-ended approach to cities, and a smart city essentially is based on systems, and there are systemic limitations which will contain the growth of the city. So when you contain the growth of the city, the internal structure, the morphological structure of the city becomes even more critical, and the application of urban design becomes very critical. So another critical aspect in today's terms is that transportation needs to be made into smart transportation. Now, what is the implications of urban design for smart transportation? Now, moving people optimally within the city is a primary function of smart transportation. That is, we need to find an optimal relationships in investments in transportation, and the planning and extension of transportation networks, and the use that it can be put to by people. Very often it's done the other way around nowadays. For instance, the Madras metro system had at one time advertised for people to come up with ideas to increase the ridership on the trains. In other words, the trains were already in place, there were no passengers in it, it was going empty most of the time, because Madras is a kind of a semi-radial kind of city, and they had to find more people to increase its ridership. So the proposal was then to densify along the stations and along the corridor, which is what almost every city is today planning to do. In other words, there is a very direct correlation between an effective transportation system which optimizes the use of the transportation network and the investment in favor of the people who use it. Second thing is that land use planning alone cannot achieve this. Three-dimensional development through urban design determines the number of people to be served by transport networks. This is actually an area where there seems to be pretty heavy confusion among our politicians, who seem to believe that higher the building, the bigger the density. So when you talk about densities, or they don't understand the concepts of density, but they know what is a tall building. They also know that a tall building means more money for the person who owns the land. So this is a very simple equation which the politician understands, but they don't understand the concept of density. They don't understand, for instance, that a tall building demands an equal amount of open space to provide for social and other amenities for the people who inhabit that plot. And therefore, the correlation between land requirement and form more or less remains determined only by density and not by the height of building. This is something which the developers don't understand. This is something developers don't need to understand because they're just looking for more money from the same plot, but the politicians don't understand this. But it is through intelligent application of urban design principles that one can actually bring in a balance, an optimization of the potential of a plot, the densities that can be supported by the networks that exist in that area, and the urban form. Third thing is increasing the options through urban form transportation nexus is essential to quality of life in a city. In other words, a lot of the projects that you see today, Mumbai has just begun to have its major public transportation networks, rail-based public transportation networks, and these networks are now completely altering the structure of the city. A city which has been always defined north-south, a city which has been always known for its linearity and its efficiency that follows from linearity in moving people, is now being transversely developed by the metro system, and connectivities across in the from the north-south to the east-west move towards east-west directions are actually changing the structure of the city, and they are also creating new nodes. I'm not saying that this should not happen, but it's very critical to look at the nexus that exists between urban form and transportation and how the city structure is actually altered by introduction of new transportation networks and how those things impact finally the urban form. This is that you need transit-oriented development, which is essentially an urban design exercise, now recognized the world over to balance transport investment and public benefit. Now, transit-oriented development has been just proclaimed as a policy, public policy in Delhi by the Delhi Development Authority, and they have identified certain stations where experimental exercises would be taken up in transit-oriented development. Of course, it is also true that many of the politicians had already bought Benami land along those routes before they brought in this transit-oriented policy, and sometimes they even said that there will be no height restriction in these places. Now, in other words, they are still looking at the opportunity between heights of buildings and transportation. They're not looking at the optimization of land, the optimization of densities, and therefore infusing quality of life through a balance that is obtained between transportation, that is movement of people, and the form in which they inhabit. Now, this is essentially an urban design function, and if this is not done, there is, of course, it is accompanied by very interesting ideas like pedestrianized zones around the stations, cycle movement within 800 meters of the area, parking regulations being reduced considerably within the in and around the transportation section. There are many devices that they have brought out, but they are all urban design moves. And it was only possible because there was a group of urban designers in Delhi who had, I would say, quote unquote, infiltrated the DDA and had gained control over the transport form related design. So it is this group of people who actually turned things around and determined that the relationship between transportation and transit-oriented development is turned into public benefit in the way that it will house more number of people, larger number of people will become dependent on the transport network that exists, and the transport network will also in turn benefit from the higher ridership that it will enjoy. These places are also designed to become mixed uses. So there is a large number of urban design moves which we normally talk about in our studios, which are put in practice in these transit-oriented developments. Next one. Now, one important thing about optimization of the resources of a city is the widening gap that we have today between the governed and the government. That is, there's a disconnect that is widening day by day between people and those in power who govern them or who make decisions on their behalf. Now, ensuring that there is a two-way connect is essentially a part of is what you call a smart function of a city, where it's not just that the government will have lots of information available at their fingertips and they are able to intervene in areas, but inversely, the people would also have an equally increased access to governmental functions. They will have the opportunity to react, respond. For instance, the use of cell phone these days and prolific use of cell phone by cutting across all classes of people. Cell phone can become a very potent instrument for ensuring this two-way flow of communication. Now, if in the normal sense when a smart city is talked about, people talk about increased dependencies on technologies, and if you just technologify a city, it becomes a smart city. Now, this is a common understanding of what a smart city is, and that is why we have IT parks which are coming up in the name of smart cities. That's why we have industrial parks which are coming out in the name of smart cities. They have nothing to do with the diversity of population profile of these a city should have, nor do they have the profile of rich, poor, and from different economic ladders and from different social groups who have different consuming patterns, who actually constitute the richness of the Indian city. This profile, if you are unable to replant this profile into the idea of a smart city, if you want to call it a city, you need to transplant this diversity of profile into the city, and that is essentially possible only if we can design the city. Because the city is also based essentially on systemic issues. Every technology that you apply is based on a system, and those systems, as much as they're efficient in what they can do, they also have their very strong limitations as to what they cannot do. There are things which are inside the technological system, and there are things which are outside the technological system. So the only option then you have is to either upgrade the technology, continually upgrade the technology, because its obsolescence will be ensured by the production market in 3 to 5 years, and municipalities will be then continuously reinvesting in these technologies in 3 to 5 years' time, and that financial burden will have to be finally picked up by the citizens. So when you talk about getting people to participate in what they are going to do, if we have clearly defined three-dimensional models, urban design models, it is a much better communication tool than any other, particularly than land use plans and structure plans that you see bandied around for developing cities in India today. So it's very critical that we switch gear to that third dimension, because then we understand the systemic limitations of technology and the capacity of the form to absorb and respond positively to that technology. Most people are not drawing literate. You'll be surprised how many IAS officers cannot read drawings. They might just try to show that they can read it, but very often they cannot read the drawings. They don't understand what is a section, elevation. We abstract all this into lines and dimensions and sizes and shapes, and which is not necessarily the language in which people understand their own physical environment. It is more so when it comes to ordinary people, because there are a number of experiments that we did in Delhi through the Urban Design Studio, where we found that people react instantly and most enthusiastically when they see a three-dimensional model. They are able to identify their school, their buildings, their street, and there's an immediate connect which people develop between a 3D model and as compared to a land use plan, which is just an abstract patch of color. They might as well be visiting a contemporary art museum where they are staring at a painting which they don't understand in any form. So it is a very similar disconnect that there is between our communication models that we have developed so far and the city development process. And it is only through 3D exercise in urban design that we can actually circumvent this. And if we want to increase the level of participation the people have, because we are a democratic country, luckily, if we want to increase their part and grasp. Now, lastly on this two-way connect is the accessing of public information from municipalities and managing governance and service delivery through smart systems imply information flow balanced by 3D design. In other words, the municipalities, if they have a complete three-dimensional grasp of the animal that they are dealing with, they are in a much better situation to understand how the technological systems that they put in place are able to react to the form that exists in the city, and where the larger and larger concentrations of people, higher and higher densities of people are living, where they have to change their strategies. You will find that the correlation between crime rates and densities, all those things will become visible. It will become literally visible to the municipalities which actually govern the city and who are trying to deliver municipal services to people. Vice versa, people are also able to see how their area is relatively positioned with the rest of the city, both spatially and also the city determines their status within the city. Now, this is a very critical information that the municipalities will be able to communicate only if they can make visible the physical structure of the city to the people who use it. Next one, please. Now, a very critical aspect of today's concept of what a smart city is that it is a sustainable city. Sustainability is not a non-smart concept. It was the very smart concept that was mooted, I think, from the 80s onwards, that sustainability has been in the air, but we still have not put those things into place. And the level of consumption of energy and the management of that consumption is a primary municipal function which is going to make a city smart or not smart. So a prime move for energy management on the demand side is dependent on quantity of inhabitants and building use. That is going to determine the kind of consumption of services that a population will have. I mean, in simple words, there will be a certain profile of consumption in residential areas, something else in commercial areas, some other mode of consumption, some other rates of consumption when it comes to hospitals and five-star hotels and those kind of semi-public and public functions. Now, this demand in a mixed-use city is vertically defined in building use apart from the land use. Normally, the planning that we do today gets away with the land use plan, and today we know through urban design that the distribution of uses vertically is as critical or more critical than defining land uses horizontally. Defining land uses horizontally has its own benefit because it is still the best tool we have for land management. But it cannot ensure quality of life, it cannot ensure physical development, it can simply anticipate a certain kind of development, and it can perhaps prevent things which are antipathic to each other from coming together. But it cannot, while it can separate things very well, effectively, it cannot bring things together. To bring things together, you need urban design. And when you bring things together, you also have to think of the vertical dimension in which the lower floors could be of some use, the street edge could be of another use, the upper floors could be another use, and so on and so forth. So apart from horizontal definition of uses, which we call land use, we also have to look at building use very, very closely. And that is only possible through urban design. When you talk about mixed use, this becomes even more critical. Now, one of the most important concepts that has come into the discourse in urban design is the compact city form. But building typology is a critical urban design tool to protect residential quality and ensure compatibility of use in mixed areas. When we very easily talk about mixed housing, when we use mixed uses in housing, we need to realize that we need to separate those functions which actually erode residential quality. We need to protect residential quality, and this is only possible through a very cleverly managed urban design, both in third dimension as well as in the planning dimension. Next one, please. Now, services form correlate is another aspect of smart cities. Municipalities which are today providing the services as well as managing the delivery of services, they need to understand that there is a direct correlation between form and services, and FSI along with coverage yields the urban form and skyline. This is in turn depends on optimization of services from urban form correlate. That there is a correlation. Effectively, when you talk about densities, even in the standard conventional planning mode, they are supposed to be looking at the capacities of services to service certain kind of densities, and that is how they are supposedly scientifically working out the kind of density distribution that you need in this. Nowadays, you even have private firms who have been outsourced the work of preparing zonal plans, who actually have Benami ownership of huge areas of land, and they very cleverly put high densities on the land which they use. So this is the kind of distortion which has come into our city development system, and it's only through the urban design tool that you can actually establish the correlate between the carrying capacities of services and the kind of form it can support. Now, this new dialogue you have in Maharashtra about 4 FSI being imposed all across, or sometimes they are even talking about 8 FSI without really looking at the implications of it. And this has very serious implications on the carrying capacity of the services lines. And not only just in terms of road networks, but also in electricity, in water, in sewage disposal, in garbage collection, garbage disposal, whole set of issues which are normally embedded in the municipal functions are impacted by FSI. And that correlation is something that's very critically to be defined only through urban design. You cannot define that through a land use plan. Now, the other issue is that effective design for the floor of the city, whether he's giving me signals to leave, I have just one more slide to show you. I'll be very quick. This is a critical point that we need to design the floor of the city. We just take the floor of the city for granted. While we have given most of it away to motor cars, there is some attempt to redesign spaces, recapture spaces for the public as walking spaces. And redesign of this is essentially an urban design function. And it is through this that we can ensure that the roads are not dug up periodically for laying new services. We can plan these sections very well. We can design the road sections. We can design the surfacing in such a way that you cause least amount of disruption. This will be very critical when it comes to the smart city design, because in a smart city will be highly dependent on how your services functions are laid, and even including electronic devices that you will have to connect across the city, fiber optic systems that are put in place. All these are very critically passing through the road section, and that is essentially an urban design function. Next one, please. This is the last part of my thing. I'll just finish in 5 minutes flat. The most critically, good urban design endears a city to its people and is a major tool to attract human resources and investments. All over the world, in Western countries, they don't have enough population to support the city services, and they are vying with each other to attract more people. We actually have the reverse condition here, where too many people are competing for too little services that we have. But still, if you want to if you want to ensure that people can move to their cities, enduring environments within the cities, not alienating environments. The graphic example, graphic contrast you can draw in Mumbai is between Mumbai and Navi Mumbai. Why is it that 50% of the flats in Navi Mumbai are lying empty? Why is it that people who are living, 15 people are sharing a toilet in the center of Bombay and they don't want to move to New Bombay even when housing is available? Why is it so? It is because Navi Mumbai has failed to endear itself to people. And Mumbai, by virtue of its natural assets, by virtue of its rich history, by virtue of its historic relationship with communities, has actually managed to carve out very interesting spaces for public use, and that endeared Mumbai to its citizens. And you can see the number of poems that are published, poetry books that are written on Bombay, number of novels which have come, number of other writing and discourses which happen on Mumbai is much higher than it happens in any other city. Why is this so? Why is it that more people want to write about Bombay? Why is it that more and more people are celebrating Bombay? Why is it that when you start a small movement here, it becomes a deluge of people? Why does it happen this way in Mumbai? You try doing that in Delhi, you'll have to buy the people from UP and Bihar. Otherwise, you won't be able to run it in Mumbai, in Delhi. But why does it happen like this? Why is it there's such a public fervor about the city in Mumbai? Because the city has endeared itself to its people in some way. There are also many issues many things which have gone wrong with Bombay. There are many things that needs to be rectified. But these endearing qualities are only brought in through urban design, good urban design. And that's the point I'd like to make here. I won't go into details of what is written here. Can you move on to the next one? This is perhaps a more critical set of things here. Strategic public art, which is an urban design function. Integrated environment, landscape, urban design. That is integration of these three things. That is natural assets of environment, landscape design and urban design together. And universal accessibility to public amenities, entertainments embedded equitably in the city corpus, high residential quality, reconnecting heritage magnets, etc. are essential to make a smart Mumbai endear itself to citizens. And these are areas to which Mumbai can certainly move forward, and urban design has a key role in this aspect of developing the smart side of Mumbai. And an effective urban design cell in the local body and a collaboration with IUDI can ensure that these soft assets, what can be called soft assets of a city, are harnessed. And unless these soft assets are harnessed, the city is not going to be a joyful place. People don't come to cities just because they want to work and they want to go back home and come back again to work and go back home. They come here because they are nurturing their families, they're nurturing their spirits in the city. And that requires the development of soft assets. And enhanced technology, good governance and urban design can deliver a smart Mumbai as an optimum city, not as a maximum city, because a maximum city has no future. It can only go downwards. Whereas an optimum city still leaves room for future. Then collaboration is a key concept in urban design. IUDI was conceptualized in public interest to generate this collaboration with local bodies, private capital, and people's participation. So these are very critical messages as far as smartening up Mumbai is concerned, that IUDI can play a pivotal role and bringing all these concepts, urban design concepts, which actually impacts the qualitative life of the city. And that's the only way forward if Mumbai has to be made smarter than what it is. It is already a smart city. I think it can be made smarter by a lot of these moves, and the moves that the urban design community in Mumbai is able to generate along with the people and the governance structure. So this tripartite relationship between the professional, the people and the government is the most productive relationship you can establish in a democracy. Thank you. That is the last slide.